Hello everyone, my name is Seth, and today I'm going to give you my review of Love Hurts. Happy almost Valentine's Day, everyone. Love Hurts is sort of a Valentine's Day film. At least that's kind of how it's being marketed. I was looking forward to this film. I thought the trailers were a lot of fun. I love Ke Huy Quan. So I was excited to see this, but unfortunately, I don't think it was quite as successful as it could have been. But before we go any farther, go ahead and like this video, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. Love Hurts follows Marvin, who is played by Ke Huy Quan. Marvin is a realtor who is pulled back into the life he left behind when his former partner in crime resurfaces with an ominous message. So as you might can guess from that, this kind of has a similar premise, a similar idea to something like John Wick or Nobody. It is directed by Jonathan Eusebio, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. I haven't heard it actually said out loud. I've only read it. But he has done a ton of stunt work on films like the John Wick films, The Fall Guy, Black Panther, The Avengers, and that's just to name a few. And if you look at his IMDb page, it is a ton of stunt work on a lot of really fun films. This film is actually his directorial debut. He has served on the second unit of some films as the second unit director, but this is his feature film debut. And I feel like you can kind of tell. There's some good stuff in this, but you can absolutely 100% tell he is an inexperienced director. There are some creative shots in this, and you can tell that this whole thing was shot by somebody who really knows action. But as a whole, there's just too many issues all throughout this film. There are so many times where they absolutely do not follow the saying, show, don't tell. They actually do that a lot throughout this film. They actually just straight up tell us things that they easily could show. They do that so many times throughout this film. And I would say that that's either a sign of just lazy filmmaking or inexperienced filmmaking. And I think that falls under the inexperienced filmmaking in terms of this film. Like, there's sometimes where it just kind of beats you over the head with exposition telling you how these characters are feeling. And it's not even like it was just characters telling other characters out loud, like how they feel. Sometimes we really just went for complete narration where the character is telling the audience exactly what they're thinking and exactly how they're feeling. Like, this narration is them telling the audience something that they could easily show us. Like, sometimes the narration will just be like, oh man, this is a tough situation. Like, I'm feeling really conflicted right now. I just don't know how to feel. Or something like, oh man, I really hope Marvin follows me. It's things like that that really kind of bothers me about this film. Some of the things that the film is just straight up telling you, you can show with good direction and good performances. You can tell this through the characters' facial expressions. You can tell it through their actions. You don't need the character themselves to basically stop everything and tell the audience exactly what they're thinking. That's like one of the big things they do a lot throughout this film that I think just doesn't work at all. And there's just some other filmmaking mistakes that just comes from inexperience all throughout this film as well. One thing I will say, for somebody who has worked with stunts on so many different films, the action in this is still good, but it's not as good as I was hoping it would be. I think the camera work and the editing in this during the fight sequences are really good, like 75% of the time. But then there's the other 25% that I feel like you can kind of get lost in the action. You can kind of get lost knowing where these different characters are, and the editing cuts are just way too quick. But like I said, 75% of the time I thought it was shot and edited really well. There weren't really any action sequences that made my jaw drop. I was wanting something that was just like super cool, but overall it's just solid kind of all the way through. It's just not quite as high level as I wanted it to be. One issue I did have with the action is that I feel like it kind of got stuck in this awkward in-between. It's like they were caught between this more grounded style of fighting and then this kind of more acrobatic, kind of more fantastical style of fighting. I felt like I needed to pick one or the other. Both can work very well, but I feel like they were just kind of caught right in the middle, And then the times where they went for more of the stylized, like Hollywood action, it stuck out kind of in a bad way for me. And I don't think the writing helped this film out much at all. First thing I want to say is that this is supposed to be kind of an action comedy, and I didn't really find a lot of it funny. They tried to have some characters have this like quick, witty banter, and it just didn't really work. It didn't seem natural to me. Mostly it didn't work for me, and it just kind of felt forced. It felt like a screenwriter was coming up with these lines, and it didn't necessarily feel like it was coming from these characters. And I would say just about all of these characters have absolutely no depth to them whatsoever. Our main character, Marvin, had just a tiny bit of depth to him, but everybody else was just so shallow, so flat. They tried giving this one henchman like this kind of backstory that he's working through something with his wife, but like, I don't really care. Like, I never really cared throughout the course of this film. And one of my big complaints here is there's not really any character development for anybody throughout the course of this film. Basically, every character starts the film and ends the film in the same place. I would say for Marvin, maybe there's a slight change toward the end, but even then, it didn't necessarily make sense to me. And our main character, Marvin, he's not put in any situations where his decisions have an impact on the story. He's not pushing the story forward in really any way, shape, or form, and that's kind of disappointing. And we don't really care about the main villain in this film at all. He's just there. He has a connection to Marvin, which I won't spoil, but it's just, I don't care, like, at all. They never made me care about him, and they never really made him seem like this giant looming threat that they kept telling the audience that he was. They told us he's this big bad villain, but we never really see it. There's like maybe one scene that you might could argue was there, but that's just one scene. This film is on the shorter side. It's less than 90 minutes. But with that being said, maybe it has to do with the lack of depth for these characters, but it doesn't feel rushed at all. So that's good. I think the pacing throughout this is good. This definitely does not need to be any longer. But even in this short amount of time, they could give more depth to these characters. But if you're not going to have any kind of depth to these characters, it seems like the shorter the better. Like I mentioned kind of at the top, this is supposed to be kind of a Valentine's Day-ish film, and like that just barely plays a role in it. I mean, that's not like a big negative. I'm just saying, like, if you're looking for this to be like an action Valentine's Day film, I wouldn't necessarily say you got that. Ke Huy Quan is good with what he's given, which he's not given much. Like I said, there's no depth, there's no subtlety to any of these characters, but he's the only character we even care about a little bit just because of how good he is in this and because of how charming he is. I mean, Ke Huy Quan is great. I love seeing him in stuff. He's just a lot of fun. He's really, really charming. He makes his film so much more watchable. If it wasn't him, if it was a lesser actor, this one would be a lot less enjoyable. He brings a lot of fun and physicality to the fight scenes as well. He really sells the fights, and he's easily the best thing about this film. Ariana DeBose gives a really flat performance in this. I know she's a better actress than this, but she was just like sleepwalking throughout this whole performance. And former NFL player Marshawn Lynch was in this as kind of one of the henchmen, one of the villains. And is he necessarily a good actor? At this point, I would have to say no. He's definitely not winning any acting awards. But I'll tell you what, he was a lot of fun in this. He's probably the second best character. He's just a lot of fun. Most of the laughs come from his character. And I think if he wants to continue his acting career, he could play roles like this and it could be successful. Everyone else in this film just kind of gives a standard run-of-the-mill performance. It's just kind of whatever, just kind of forgettable. As a whole, I will say that I don't think this film was nearly as good as I wanted it to be. It's entertaining enough in the sense that I didn't hate it. The action is fun for the most part, and Ke Huy Quan is easily the best thing about this film. He's so fun, he's charming. But other than that, there's a lot of, I guess I would say, inexperienced filmmaking mistakes that really leads to a lot of problems throughout this film. I feel like a lot of these problems just kind of scream inexperienced filmmaking. There's no substance or subtlety to anything in this film. There are some bad performances in this, and it's just kind of disappointing. I think there is some potential here. I think the director can learn from this and deliver a better film next time. But I think I'm gonna have to give Love Hurts a 2 out of 5. But that's it. That's my review of Love Hurts. Have you seen this film? Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. You can follow me on social media pretty much anywhere at CinemaSeth, and I'll see you next time.